makes their own decisions and everybody makes their own choices, but they're not the only ones that suffer the consequences.
And he weighs a whopping 9 pounds, 10 ounces, and he was 23 inches in length.
For as long as I can remember, there was this sense of bewilderment with people looking at our family. And
well, we left the show, like 2 years ago?
3 years ago.
3 years ago now. Because basically our family goals that we had for ourselves didn't align with what we found out. That like we ended up finding out like we didn't have as much control over our lives as it related to like the show and stuff.
Welcome down the rabbit hole, friends. I'm going to take a time out to share with you something kind of funny. We are just reaching like the low 70s here where I live, and my son Jack has grown up in a tropical environment his whole life, and he is really struggling. In the morning, he'll be like, I can't go to school, it's so cold. And he's been doing fine with school otherwise. And then last night, and I had heard that he was doing great in class, and then last night I received this note from his teacher. Let me read it to you. Jack refused to participate during math today. He said he would be too cold if he had to cut, because they wanted him to use scissors to cut out like bumblebees to show, like, I think the question they were asking is like 8 plus 5. He's supposed to write 8 plus 5 and then cut out the bumblebees and show how many it would be. And she wrote, please practice these problems at home with him, smiley face. Okay. So I was like, okay. And I talked to him about it, and he was like, yeah, it was just like way too cold. So this is going to be like an ongoing thing for us. And I sat down with him to do it. I just thought this was so funny because it's a word problem. It'll say there were 8 butterflies, then 4 more came along. So I said, okay, let's read the word problem, and then we'll have to think about where will we put the numbers. And Jack just looked at me and he wrote 12 on the paper. So he had already read the word problem and solved the problem without like writing 8 plus 4 and without using the butterflies. He just wrote the answer 12. And then I had to go back and be like, actually, we do have to cut out the butterflies and put them on here. And he was like, it makes me so cold. So apparently cutting can contribute to your shivering, because he also likes to, when he says he's like, when he says he's cold, like he's shivering. My poor guy. If you have any thoughts about it, I am going to take him to the doctor to have a blood panel run. Just, I'm wondering if he's a little bit anemic, and I'll start him on some iron anyway, but I just think it's so funny. All right, so that's an aside. As we move into what can be like kind of difficult to hear about, the next chapter, chapter 4, has everything to do with the financial and emotional abuse, as I see it, that Jill and her husband end up enduring in the early part of their marriage, coming directly from her father, Jim Bob. Chapter 4 is entitled Costs. It starts with reviewing some of Jill's wedding. And we know that the wedding was filmed for TLC, so there were a lot of requirements that Jill and Derek had to fulfill. So already at the very start of their marriage, it's being laid out for them. You've got to do things the way TLC needs them to be done. Jill writes, when you're in the world of reality TV, everything has a cost. The shopping carts full of great food, the trip to Nepal to meet Derek in person for the first time, the wedding itself. They all came with a price tag, which we paid by letting the cameras into our lives, giving them access to all the raw, unfiltered action to be served up as entertainment. Don't get me wrong, it was a privilege to be able to benefit like that. Being a Duggar on TV meant that I had opportunities and experience I never would have enjoyed otherwise. The show gave me so much. I am grateful for the places I have been, the moments I have enjoyed, and the people I have met. But, ... some things are not worth the cost. Some things are not for sale. Jill lets us know that she and Derek specifically stated they would not allow the honeymoon to be paid for or filmed, and I know a lot of her siblings did go through with having their honeymoons paid for, so that was something that she put a boundary up with. She talks about how her and Derek went away for like a very short period of time, I think a few days, to like North Carolina, something small. And when they returned home, she kind of points out that she thought it sounds like she thinks it was kind of weird or interesting that her dad's response to the situation was, "Wow, you're back early. I thought you guys would be gone for a whole month." And I think I read that the indication from Jill is that he was so out of touch with the idea that Derek needed to get home to go back to work, to be able to afford to take care of Jill and provide for their family. I don't know if there's also like a sexual innuendo with that, but it sounds more to me like Jill's coming at it kind of sort of like her dad was so like, why wouldn't you just stay out as long as you could? And she's kind of like, we have to provide for ourselves. And this kind of starts us on this journey of realizing, and Jill is showing us, that she and Derek were exceedingly busy just trying to be a new couple who has to learn to take care of themselves, afford everything for themselves. And like most of us, it wasn't an easy time for them, especially financially. But there was also a lot of joy because shortly after the wedding, Jill and Derek find out that his mom, Kathy, is cancer-free. And this is truly like a miracle for them because she was told by doctors and physicians that there was just a very low chance that she would be able to rid herself of the cancer. So this was exceedingly wonderful news for everyone. Jill gets pregnant very shortly after the wedding, and she talks about having, a lot of issues with nausea and just not feeling well. And she remembers seeing her mom go through that. And I had always assumed that Michelle must have loved pregnancy to do this over and over again, but Jill is letting us know that the pregnancies were hard on her mom and that she was often nauseous and uncomfortable and just not feeling well, especially in the earlier months. And Jill experiences that as well. It's in these early days that Jill starts to realize that filming is becoming a burden, especially for Derek, although she's not hearing a lot of complaints from him, but she's watching and seeing that it's an issue. She writes, "It was different now that Derek and I were married, and the 20 hours of filming we had to fit in each week quickly became a burden for us." So they are, filming for family ministry. They are unpaid volunteers, and Derek is working over 40 hours a week. Jill is pregnant and she's not feeling well, and they're doing the filming and they're not getting paid for it. That is not fair. Most people would say, I can't do this, and they were in a situation where they felt compelled emotionally. It's mainly emotionally because there's no financial support coming in. They feel compelled emotionally to keep doing this, and also religiously because, of course, Jim Bob always frames it as this is an important ministry that we're doing. Finally, one day, Derek makes this statement that I think she was expecting a lot sooner. He says, "All this filming, it's hard." And she says they sit in silence a little while after that. And he does say, "With you being pregnant and all, it's even harder. Was it always like this?" And Jill says, "I know. I'm finding it hard too. It's just a little longer. Once Jessa gets married and starts having kids, it will lighten our load." So it's like they already knew that this was all about the marriages, that like, it's interesting that Jill kind of is like, please let another sister get married. Please let someone else be the focus for a little while. Meanwhile, Derek is just like, he's very supportive. He kind of will be like, okay, I love you. So in the beginning, Derek is really trying. He's like trying to just make it work. And he feels like he committed to doing this for Jill and the family. Jill goes on to talk about how even though she's an adult now, there's still an expectation within the IBLP that she obey her parents. And this is always on her mind, and it does cause conflicts in her heart, like about what she wants and what her husband wants and needs. And they're just little things that are starting to crop up early in her relationship. Now she's pregnant. This is like an issue within the filming because the film crew, and I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of it, but it's like they need to control how this gets out because it's going to appear on the show and it's going to be a big deal on the show. So they're restricting who she can talk to about it, what she can do. They're going to have to film the baby shower, all this kind of stuff. As you can imagine, this becomes an issue for Jill. Once again, her life is not her own. She cannot make her own choices. It's not like she makes the choice, she tells them what she's going to do, and then they come and film it. No, they control how this is going to roll out. They don't even want her to tell her parents or her siblings. I'm pretty sure the baby announcement for Jill, if I remember correctly, happened in kind of like a weird way where everybody gathers together at the big house and the cameras are all there, and then Jill and Derek roll in and they look exhausted. They look exhausted and they're like, well, we just want to let you know we're pregnant. And Jill to me, I think what I remember is Jill was sort of like, I'm pregnant. Like so tired. So that's all being controlled by the filming. And they start to talk about with the producers whether or not they're going to film the birth. And Jill says from the beginning she really didn't want to film the birth. She says, even though I was now Miss Jill Dillard, I was still sweet Jilly Muffin. I wanted to please everyone, not just my husband, but my parents and the network as well. I was a mess of conflict and didn't know how to balance the feelings. I totally... Many of you can relate to this, but this is on another level because of the religious undertones and then also just the fact that you're working with a big, powerful network. If you are a people pleaser, if I was in this situation, I would have been really struggling. And I could see how for me, it would have led to anxiety, depression, all kinds of things because I'm the eldest born child, always wanting to do everything right, always wanting to be the best I can be. So I can relate a lot to Jill here, where it seems like she's very stressed out by all of this. Okay, things are getting stressful, and then all of a sudden, Jim Bob decides that he is going to offer to take Jill and Derek on a mission trip down to El Salvador with the rest of the family, and this ends up becoming like a really good opportunity for them in which Jill and Derek are both like, we love this. At first, Jill is worried because Derek's never been down to like South America, Spanish-speaking countries. He was in Nepal before, and she says like she was just in awe of how well he took to it, the fact that he was picking up the language, trying to learn it, and she was really impressed with him. And it's there and then that she kind of realized like this is a calling for us. And the missionary that they were visiting down there let Jill and Derek know we could use a couple like you down here helping to support the local church community, and they were very interested in it. So Jill and Derek decide that they want to take the leap and go ahead and try to get involved in this missionary cause. Jill is pregnant. She's doing her midwifery stuff. So there's just a lot going on, but now they need to go to Jim Bob and the network and tell them like they want to go down south and do this missionary work, and it's also a very difficult and turbulent time for them. Now it's time for Jill to give birth, and she does talk about how she planned for a natural birth, and all of her plans went up in smoke, and she had to readjust and be flexible and ended up going into the hospital. The camera crew and the producers were pressuring her to film Derek, and I think she says also her mom had to do a lot of filming. They filmed it themselves and gave the crew the video that they had. Jill says that she labored for 68 hours straight, and being that she's a midwife, she's seen a lot of births, and she said that it was like, you know, a pretty hard situation. He was born via C-section, and she was on a lot of drugs, and it took a lot of time to recover. And she said during this time, which I can understand again, you know, this is supposed to be a time in which she should only be focused on herself and her baby, but she had a lot of fears about whether or not they were getting enough footage or the right footage for the network, and would the network be happy with it or upset. That's really sad that she had to deal with all of that. And this is where she talks about, like, she's very slowly starting to see that the IBL's teachings about authority are causing issues within her life, because she's very focused on the authority of her father to the detriment of herself, and then also to the detriment of Derek and potentially maybe now her child. So she's starting to kind of see that there are cracks in this system that has been created by Jim Bob. So Jill and Derek have had their first child, And it's May 2015. They are like still living in the United States, and things are seemingly like going as planned for them. They're thinking about leaving for the missionary work. They're still trying to do all the filming. And then it was during this month that Jim Bob Duggar has to approach the family and let them know that something unexpected had happened. Jill writes that Jim Bob came into the room, the big room at the big house, looking drained and worried, like he had forgotten how to hold the smile he wore so often. He gathered some of the older ones around and spoke softly. I just got word that a tabloid has information about the stuff that happened a long time ago, stuff that happened between Josh and the girls. So this is where we enter the time period in which everything starts to come out about Josh. He's living and working in DC with Anna. He's going to lose his job because of all of this. And Jill is left in utter shock that all of this information has been exposed by the media. Jim Bob apologizes to the girls, and he does say, I'm doing all I can to make them stop. I'm sure that what they're doing is illegal, and I want to get this nipped in the bud. So he's letting them know something is going to come out about what happened with Josh, and I'm going to try to stop it. This was a really hard time for Jill. That's the sense that we get in the book. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. She was, I think, struggling with like then providing the best, happiest care for her son because she couldn't believe what was happening in her family. She says, I wanted to hide, and she couldn't. She actually writes she had to take her son to a doctor's appointment. She didn't want to go because would the tabloids be there? Were people going to be looking at her because they read something about her in the tabloids? It's so sad. And her dad called her, so sad, and said, they've released it. I'm sorry. She says, Jessa and I burst into tears. They promised us secrecy, I said when I could finally speak. They said it was private. That was a safe place. How could this happen? In reading the book, I really came to understand that this was like a true betrayal for Jill in ways that are really hard to swallow, because your family, like her family, Josh betrayed her. Her family maybe betrayed her in certain ways, especially Jim Bob with some of his responses to what happened with Josh. But you kind of expect that the law, the government, these very like ordered places in society would not be able to betray you in these ways. So this, I think, was such a shock for her after everything that happened, that the people that she was told it was the safest to go to, in the end, they caused her such additional harm in her life. And it's something that can never be taken back, can never be removed. You know, it's never going to go backwards, so that, you know, maybe we know that Josh was inappropriate, but we don't know that it had anything to do with his sisters. You know, the information was released and everybody knew. And it's really heartbreaking to see how much it affected Jill in her everyday life. Throughout the next several pages, there's just a real emphasis from Jill that she had trouble sleeping, and nightmares were a big issue for her during this time, and that Derek was going to work and then coming home and being as supportive as he could be for her. It really sounds like he was there for her in all the ways that she needed him. Jill talks about feeling humiliation and shame. It's just unbelievable that she, out of all of them, out of any of the people involved in this, she and Jessa and Joy, all the girls, they should not be the ones who have to feel any of that. We'll see in this book as well that in polar opposition, Josh is going around like it was nothing. And I think that that is also very hard. That must have been very hard. It's very hard for me to read about But here is Jill suffering, crying, not being able to sleep at night, not being able to enjoy her new baby. And Josh is coming home like, hey guys, lost my job. Someone's going to need to give me a car lot now. You know, I mean, really. And it's just clearly deep psychological problems going on there that are not, it's getting to the level that it's not really fixable. And I think Jill is starting to see that as well. This is really important to Jill, so I'm going to talk about it here really quickly, and you can read more about it in the book. But she says that I hold in touch Bear, Kathy O'Kelly, Ernest Kate, and the city of Springdale, the Washington County Sheriff's Office, and Rick Hoyt responsible for illegally releasing and publishing the report, for inflicting on me and my sisters the trauma of a second victimization, a trauma that was made so much worse than the first by the fact that it was so public. I am clear about the mistakes that my parents have made over the years with our upbringing, especially Pop's, but the way my parents handled or didn't handle things with Josh does not influence or justify the release of juvenile records and further re-traumatization and exploitation of innocent victims. Yeah, especially because you think that if you go to this kind of like legal system, they are going to protect you, and that's not what happened. She said it was just very hard at home, and the Duggar house became like Duggar HQ, Duggar headquarters, and there was a lot of attention going on there. All of the family was there, like trying to help each other. Mom was with all the little kids, and Pops was in the corner with Chad, his right-hand man. This is a person that's working with him. It's like a go-between for him and TLC and the entertainment network and the producers. And she says Josh and his family were also there. This might seem strange, but I suppose events were somehow viewed as a thing of the past by that point. It had been 3 months since I'd seen Josh because he had moved to Washington, D.C. in 2013 to work on a conservative group lobbying against access to things like stem cell research, abortion, divorce, and P. Ironically enough, given later events. As soon as the story broke, he resigned, and he, Anna, and the kids all fled the paparazzi and came back to Arkansas. And that's when you guys know that I found out that Steve Neild was Kate Gosselin's bodyguard, was the bodyguard for Josh Duggar and Anna during that time, and there was like a big crossover. Steve Neild knows where the bodies are buried, basically is what I'm saying. Okay, Jill says that during this time, she didn't know how to be around Josh, but once again, kind of the point of what she's saying here is that Josh was sort of acting like, and everyone else was sort of acting like, you know, I mean, they were concerned about like what was going to happen with the show, if Josh was going to be okay, if the girls were going to be okay. I do think there was more of a focus on Josh, but just the whole atmosphere was one of like, something was done to Josh that's just so unfair. But now we just have to fix it and get him going again, doing something else. She says, it felt like the distant past, but even so, I didn't expect him, Josh, to be quite as relaxed as he was. And later in the days, I didn't expect him to start laughing, even though it was clearly nervous laughter when he described being held under siege by photographers. It felt weird that he was acting like this, but it was Mom who dealt with it. Josh, she barked. It's not your fault that this was released, but you need to feel that you were behind all this. Don't be so arrogant. I want to know, where was Jim Bob when she said that? You know, what was his reaction? And thank God that she said that. She could have said a lot more. I hope she was completely disgusted. And I really hope that she has strongly communicated to Josh, like, I'm disgusted by you. You know, you're my firstborn son. I loved you my whole entire life. But what you have done, and for you to act like when your sisters are suffering, F you. I mean, I really hope he knows. Josh's smile vanished. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry to you girls, and that you all are having to go through all this. Yeah, so he's gross. There's not a lot you can say about it. is so full of himself. And once again, it's hard to read all of this because we see that like he's being given so many opportunities, and this family is so supportive in way too many ways towards him, in ways that he should have had a lot more consequences his whole entire life. All right, so now Jim Bob and Chad are working on like what steps they need to take to fix everything. They've got to fix it all. And they're trying to figure out how they can save the ministry, which is the show. Jill recalls that Jim Bob said, "It was wrong what Josh did," he said, looking at all of us, "but we will get past this. We will move on. We need to help TLC understand that this happened in the past, that this was something we have dealt with already." And this is when Chad and Jim Bob started talking about how they were going to save the show by doing an interview. And so they were talking about it in front of other people. Jill would overhear all of this information, and she felt like it was incumbent upon her to step up and say, "I will do it. I will do the interview." They were talking about how Josh definitely couldn't be a part of it. They would need someone to come forward. They were talking about it in front of her. So was that a setup? In many ways, I imagine that it probably was, getting someone like Jill or someone else in the family to think that they volunteered to do this when really they're being asked and told that this is what they need to do. Jill writes, and this is something that I think is important to read verbatim. "I was one of the older kids, so I naturally felt more weight and responsibility to do something, to help somehow. This girl who's been incredibly victimized by all of this, who's always been the one who did help, who was responsible, who protected other children in the family, is once again having everything put on her shoulders." She writes, "And I wanted to help them, to show my love and loyalty in this hardest of times, but I had no boundaries, no sense of what I needed to do to protect myself. I was terrified and didn't want to do the interview at all, but I felt like it was the only way to prove my love and commitment to my parents. I could clear their name and tell everyone that my brother's problems were a thing of the past. How could I stay silent? I thought I knew how much it would cost me." We're watching Jill be like taken advantage of time and time again, and by the person in her life who's kind of gaslighting her into thinking he's her biggest supporter, and that's Jim Bob. You know, it's really sad to see. So Jill, you know, while everyone's standing around trying to figure out what they're going to do, she steps forward and says, "I would be willing," I said. "I'll do the interview." A wave of nausea hit me like nothing I'd ever experienced before. The room was spinning, the sound of blood rushing in my ear. I knew why I'd done it, but what had I done? "Me too," said Jessa. "I'll do it with you." Pops looked at us both. "Are you sure?" We nodded. "Are you sure? You've been talking about it in front of them. Like, this is like the most crucial thing, and if only someone would step forward to help out. You know, so once again, just unfortunately, this looks highly manipulative to me. So I've been very like understanding of Jim Bob and Michelle, and I do believe that they wanted to have a good family. I've talked about that. I also think that when we compare what Jim Bob and Michelle did to a lot of other people in the IBLP families that have come forward saying like there was a lot of like heavy physical abuse, I think we can see that this was, in many ways, many of the children have said that this was a loving family. But I do think there's heavy manipulation going on for the betterment of Jim Bob's own life. So it's really sad to see that. So now it's time to go into talking about the Megyn Kelly interview. There's a picture in the book of it's Jim Bob, Michelle, Jessa, Jill, and their husbands all standing together at the Megyn Kelly interview with Megyn Kelly taking a picture of everyone smiling. I think that's so sad. I think this picture is actually really sick. They're being interviewed about the essay, and they make their husband stand there and smile with them. You can see how Derek looks. Really seems to show that he's like, what the fuck is going on here? I'll put the picture up on the screen. So they get ready for the interview, and Chad is heavily involved, this guy that's helping her dad. And Jill says, like, it was really hard. I knew that I was about to face a firing squad, but I felt like I needed to vouch for Mom and Dad. So I think she was really trying to stand up for them more than she was for Josh in certain ways. Okay, that is the end of chapter 4. Our next video will be all about chapter 5, which is called Tearing Apart. And it's about Jill coming to terms with needing to separate herself from her family and move forward with her husband and her own child. We're about halfway through the book. We only have a couple more chapters left. I'm so excited that you're here with me. Thank you for following this series, and we only have a couple more videos to come out. So I've been thinking about all of you as the days are getting a little bit colder here. I hope you're getting ready for October. I love fall. I love pumpkin season. I hope Jill and Derek, and really all the kids in this family, I hope that things calm down a little bit for them and they get to enjoy the fall as well with their kids. This is my favorite time of year, and there's so many good things that come for you to do with your family during this time. Much love to all of you. I hope that you will join me next time as we head down yet another rabbit hole.